Well, good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Britain's had its fair share of failed politicians lately. Boris Johnson lied more often than he tried. Our last Prime Minister, Liz Truss, had the shelf life of a lettuce. And Theresa May's legacy, if only we could remember it, would fit very neatly onto a postage stamp. But few politicians in modern history have failed harder and more often than Matt Hancock. This attention-seeking, perma-grinning gopher of a man is about to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That means he'll spend several weeks in a jungle in Australia, pocketing a massive fee on top of his MP salary, eating kangaroo testicles for public delectation. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually feel sorry for the kangaroo testicles. I spent 6 years as a judge on Britain and America's Got Talent, so I know a thing or two about entertainment TV and talent. And it got me thinking, why would they choose Matt Hancock? What are his special talents? Maybe it's singing. No, for the love of God, do stop him now. He's not a singer. What about acting? Look very carefully here. Look for tears. Just simple words there, reacting it. You're quite emotional by that.
Well, it's just, it's been such a tough year for so many people, and there's William Shakespeare putting it so simply for everybody that, we can get on with our lives. And
yeah, not a single tear, was there? I've seen more emotion from the waxworks at Madame Tussauds. Matt's also a budding tech whiz. Earlier this year, he became the first MP to enter the metaverse with his digital imagining of himself, bringing a whole new level of meaning to Instagram versus reality. So finally, what about his actual core skill? The one thing we know that he is supposed to be competent at, being a politician, the thing he's paid to do. Well, he was forced out as health secretary for snogging and groping his advisor during a lockdown, breaking his own lockdown rules. And before that, as health secretary during the pandemic, he said he was doing this to protect nursing homes.
so right from the start, we've tried to throw a protective ring around our care homes.
Well, we absolutely did throw a protective ring around social care.
We'll keep working to strengthen the protective ring that we've cast around all our care homes.
Absolute nonsense. There was no protective ring. Quite the opposite. Hancock sent thousands of elderly patients from hospitals back to their nursing homes without testing them. That led to COVID spreading the wildfire inside those homes, causing countless more deaths than should ever have been allowed to happen. It was a deadly fiasco of a policy from a travesty of a health secretary with tragic consequences for thousands of families. I may shock you now, Mr. Hancock, because I'm actually glad you're going to a remote tarantula-infested jungle on the opposite side of the world. On behalf of the entire British public, I think I'm safe in saying, I hope you stay there. Well, joining me now to discuss this is former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik, who also went into I'm a Celebrity, and the former Conservative Minister Ann Widdecombe, who I presume would rather shoot herself than go into the jungle, although she did compete as strictly and extremely capably on the dance floor, I might add. We're also joined by care home owner David Crabtree. Now, 16 of his residents died in the first wave of the pandemic. Well, welcome to all of you. I want to start with you, David Crabtree, because I remember interviewing you at the height of the pandemic when so many people were dying. And you gave such a heartfelt and agonised interview in many ways about the appalling situation in care homes. When you heard that Matt Hancock is going into the I'm a Celebrity jungle while you're still an MP, what was your view?
Before I comment on that, Piers, can I thank you personally for being the lone voice in early 2020 for social care workers and social care residents? There was no one more shouting for us. As to Mr. Hancock, it's the last pitiful act of a pathetic, lying man. There was no ring, no protection for us. What's emotional is that when somebody brings this up again, it brings back all the things that you sort of put to the back of your mind. We only this month were able to have a memorial for those who died in 2020, simply because relatives weren't allowed to go to their funerals. We weren't allowed to see the relatives. So for 2 years, we've never seen those families again. So we've just been able to sort of at least bring that to a conclusion. But as to Mr. Hancock, he lied There is no two ways about this. He lied. 850 social care workers died on top of thousands of elderly. There were collateral damage. Someone, with his permission, gave the hospitals the report to say you can discharge and without a negative test. They do not need to be negative to discharge. They discharged 2 to us within the first week of March, and both died, and subsequently a further 7 died as a result of those discharges directly. This man oversaw, this is Blair's Iraq, this is Hancock's death of elderly. He is solely responsible for it. I'm still angry about what that man did.
I can tell. And you know what angers me about all this is that while some people have been sort of laughing about this, extraordinary twist to his career, it emerged today he's also been taking part in the celebrity SAS show on Channel 4. He's already filmed that. He's also written a book of his pandemic diaries, which I'm sure will be an attempt to gloss over any of his culpability, because it wasn't just about care homes. He also failed and lied to the public about testing. He massaged those figures about the number of tests that were being done, and we held him to account for that. I thought our open border policy was a complete disaster, and he was partly responsible for that as well as Health Secretary. We had no PPE, so hundreds and hundreds of health and care workers died in their workplace because they weren't properly protected. This first wave of the pandemic in our country was a complete disaster. And it's completely true to say that later we did well with vaccines. But that first wave was a disaster, and the Health Secretary presiding over this was Matt Hancock. And for him to now, before there's even been a proper inquiry into what happened and what culpability he may actually be proven to have had, for him to now go into a reality show in a jungle in the way that he's doing for hundreds of thousands of pounds, I think is an absolute smack in the face, particularly to people like you who had to go through so much appalling trauma, losing all these people in your homes. And I know other people. I have friends of mine who lost their parents in care homes and had to have a last conversation on FaceTime. I just think it's an appalling smack in the face to them. And the idea he's still an MP, receiving an MP salary, is completely disgraceful.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know whether this is to pay the divorce settlements or what it's supposed to do. But in the end, he should have, all he had to do was say that we couldn't do it, or there was some reason that they couldn't do it. But instead, contracts were awarded for PPE that were no use to us. We couldn't get them. More importantly, they were discharging elderly people back to home, where home care workers were going in without PPE, without the knowledge that that the resident had COVID. He put at risk millions of people and then denied it and had the blatancy to stand there and say he had put a ring of protection around us, not once, but several times.
Yeah.
The man needs to be held account.
Yeah, I agree. David, it's good to talk to you. I wish it was always in better circumstances, but I love your passion. I love how much you care about what happened in your care homes, and it's good to catch up with you. And I'm just sorry, again, it's for the wrong reasons, but I look forward to talking to you perhaps on a happier occasion.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring in, Anne,
yeah.
I don't know what you think. To me, the idea of an MP, particularly one who's been disgraced, who's lost his ministerial position because he was breaking his own lockdown rules whilst having an affair and was caught doing it by a newspaper, that had also presided over a shambolic first wave of this pandemic by any yardstick. There's been no inquiry yet, which has cleared him, as he presumably hopes it might do, but I don't think it will. You put all this in totality, and he's now getting hundreds of thousands of pounds to go into a jungle and prance about with celebrities. What do you make of it?
Well, what I would say is this, that even without all those horrendous circumstances, no serving MP should go on a reality show which takes them away from their constituency and from the House of Commons, where they're paid to vote. It takes them away for weeks on end. Weekend here, a weekend, that's different. Weeks on end. And that is why I turned down Strictly for 5 years running. I said no. As soon as I retired, I said yes, because I wanted to do it. But I wasn't going to do it while I was an MP. And it's not only time, there's something else, Piers, dignity. You do actually have a duty of dignity to the office while you're an MP. And there's nothing dignified about the jungle.
Well, OK, Lembit, what about his constituents?
Right.
This guy has already heaped
yeah.
embarrassment onto his constituency, right? He's managed to hang on as an MP. But this is, as I say, not just I'm a celebrity. He's managed to find time to write a book of diaries. He's managed to find time to do this SAS show on Channel 4. Now he's going in the jungle. When is he finding any time to do the job he's actually paid to do on a daily basis, which serve the constituents?
Right, direct answer to that question. That is a matter for his constituents at the next election. And I've got experience of this. I may or may not have lost my seat in 2010.
Why isn't it a matter for me as a taxpayer who pays his salary?
You can have an opinion, but we have a democratic system here. Just as in 2010, Montgomeryshire decided they didn't want me anymore for whatever reason, so also his constituents in our democratic system can make the judgment. Now, I know Ann's position and I respect it. I hold a different view here. You've just heard what sounds like a tragic performance as a cabinet minister. That's different to the principle which Anne rightly raises about whether you should be able to do these extended programmes on reality TV. Now, surely no one disagrees with the principle of a politician doing a reality show. Have I got news for you? It's a comedy show. Vince Cable, very popular politician, did do a little bit of dancing, not the whole thing.
Hang on. Have I got news for you? It's a 3-hour taping
That's
on a
right.
Thursday night. Right? This
right.
guy's disappearing off for weeks to Australia, right? When we're in the middle of a crushing cost of living crisis.
Yeah,
I mean, the flaming
it
brass
could be
neck
4
of the
weeks.
man.
It could be 4 weeks.
Yeah, but
Okay,
the brass neck of it.
All right, so the first point...
He's being paid by us, the taxpayer, not to go and eat kangaroo
Who
testicles.
is going to cope? No, let me ask you this, Lembit. Who is going to cope if there is an emergency in his constituency or a constituent has an emergency? Where does that constituent go?
Yeah, I work on the assumption that if there's... and I don't know this, but I've been told this by second-hand authority, that there is some clause which says if there's an emergency of a sufficiently serious nature, which is a judgment call, he would...
Sorry, there is. It's called the cost of living
All right,
crisis.
well, hold on.
Right, millions of people in this country are currently facing a winter of hunger, of freezing cold. We've got pensioners going on buses to be warm.
Piers, because I do have experience of this. Let me just ask you this. A constituent gets in touch with the MP because the electricity is about to be cut off. They've got kids in the house. This has happened. And it probably happened with you as well. And when that sort of thing happens, you need the MP. His staff don't have the clout.
Right, two points.
I must saw you on TV earlier, then. But I'm not being... Look, we've always
trying
gotten
to answer your question.
I know, but you're trying to defend the indefensible.
You don't know what I'm going to say
Well,
yet,
I do know what you said earlier on television.
All right,
I watched the interview.
Go on.
You compared him to Winston Churchill.
Oh, come on.
No,
You said Winston
Oh, come
Churchill
on.
also made
You did
mistakes
not.
and came back and won us the war.
Winston
Do
Churchill.
you think Winston Churchill would go into a jungle with a bunch of Z-list celebrities and munch kangaroo testicles
Well,
in a vote by the public?
I was one of those lists of
Yes,
celebrities. that have you
exactly.
now, but I wasn't
No
an MP,
offence, but
admittedly.
yes.
Second, right,
And
first,
you're no Winston Churchill either,
first
right?
point,
You'd
well,
admit it.
I've never pretended to be. First point, that let's recognise no one here on the three of us is denying that you could do reality shows. You're arguing about the length of time away.
Yes.
So let's move straight to that second point that Anne's raised. If you're on holiday with your family as an MP, the same situation can arise. Does that mean that the MP has to fly back?
Phone.
Okay.
You can pick up
right.
the phone.
So it's not about physically being
He's not on
present.
holiday. Parliament's not in
But he
recess.
doesn't have a phone in the jungle.
Parliament's not in recess. He's not on holiday.
All right, but let's remember that.
But you can pick up the phone if you're on holiday. I've had to do that as well.
okay.
Some MPs have had to come back from their holidays.
So number one, it's not about whether you do reality shows, it's the length of time. Number two, it's not about being physically present, as Anne's just said. So it's the third question. Is it enough of a...
Well, actually, he has
He's got to vote.
because he can't be contacted on the
vote.
phone.
Is it enough of an obstruction?
You don't have phones in the
vote.
jungle.
Okay.
You can't vote remotely.
Is that enough of an obstruction to say that no politician should do that?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
I don't agree. And here's
Why not?
But I'm just going to tell you, most things that do turn up in your surgery are handled de facto. Certainly, for me, this was
Sorry,
the case.
I don't
by
pay,
my
Lembit,
staff.
I don't
by
pay
my staff.
I don't pay my taxes to see serving members of Parliament go on jollies to Australia.
Wait a minute.
In
Don't run away from my
with Boy
answer.
George.
Don't
Sorry,
run
I
away
don't.
from my answer.
How do you vote from the jungle when there's a big issue in Parliament?
Yeah.
How do you
All right.
vote?
How does he vote?
Well, I don't know if he's got a pairing
Well,
circumstance.
he can't vote now. He's had the whip taken away,
but
right?
there could
Oh,
be...
he can still vote.
Yeah,
He can still vote?
Yeah, but having
So
said...
explain
course.
that for me. If you have the whip taken away, then in, you can still vote.
You're not expelled from
so
Parliament.
what's the punishment, really?
Well, if you have the whip withdrawn, what it means is you're no longer regarded as a member of the party. But you can still vote in Parliament as an individual.
So why is he not going to be voting then?
Well, obviously, because he's not physically there. He's
Correct.
made that
So
judgment.
you said he doesn't need to be physically there. He does.
Let's get to the core point here. You listed all the things he's doing. My guess is he's trying to change his career. He may not stand at the next election.
I think he's ending his career.
Maybe so.
I'll tell you what's going to happen.
Maybe
The British
that's his
public are
judgment
going to...
call.
They're going to make him do the worst possible challenges and then very quickly boot him out.
Maybe so, but think about it this way, right? You're mixing up his performance as a cabinet minister with the principle of whether any politician
No,
should
I'm not.
go
I'm actually,
into that.
no, I'm actually
into
saying.
that, into the
I'm actually
jungle.
saying both to me are disqualifying. Right? One, he was the health secretary.
But they're two different things.
He was the health secretary
Piers.
without. Well, I'm explaining to you why both matter. Right? On one count, he was the health secretary who presided over the worst imaginable pandemic conduct by government I've seen, which is why we had the worst overall death toll in Europe in terms of total number killed, mostly in the first wave. One, he should be held accountable for that before he jollies off to some jungle. And secondly, as a serving MP where we pay a salary, he should not be doing this.
But, all right, on the first point, we can now pass judgment about Matt Hancock, perfectly legitimate political conversation to have, but it's separate to me. Separate to the point that Anne's raised, where I disagree, but I respect
But
your
you won't
position,
answer
about
my
whether you
question.
can go on an extended
question, Anne?
reality
the
TV
question
show.
is, how does he vote, which is his constitutional duty as a member of
How
Parliament?
does he
It's
vote?
How
not
does
his
he vote?
constitutional duty.
Of course it is.
There is no.
Why is he an MP?
There is no
Why?
job description
He's not
for a
going to
member of Parliament.
serve his constituents.
It's not a constitutional duty.
And he's not going to
Did you
vote.
It is a
Let me ask you, did you vote on every single vote? Were you there on Fridays for German debates?
I was frequently there on a Friday, and the
you
German
missed
debates
some.
don't have a vote.
But you
do
missed
they?
it. Just not the German debates.
Do you know
Sorry,
the worst thing about
I meant
it?
private members'
The worst thing
debates,
about
sorry.
it is, I think he waited. There was an absolutely cringe-making clip of Rishi Sunak celebrating becoming Prime Minister. I don't know if we've got it.
Yeah,
but
I've seen it.
And it's the one where he basically goes past, and this happens. We've got it, I think. And you know what? All right, he completely deliberately shuns Hancock there. But the reality is, of
You
course,
see what you want to see.
no, he does. Listen,
I
I know
don't.
I know
I'm
Rishi
not
Sunak,
convinced.
trust me. He saw him
Oh,
there
not
and
convinced.
decided to blank him. So, but the point being, though, if he'd embraced Hancock and given him a new job, Hancock would have immediately abandoned all plans to go to the jungle.
So why
probably.
should he not be pragmatic about his future, Piers?
Why doesn't he
You've
be
made
honest?
decisions.
Why doesn't he be
We've all made-
honest and stand down as an MP? He's got 2 more years for
What's
an election.
dishonest about him making that judgment? Back to my original point,
Sorry.
which you haven't answered.
No,
Why don't
he
you
can
leave
go-
it to his
he can-
constituents
he-
to make
be
this
clear,
judgment?
he-
That's how democracy works in this country,
I'll tell you how
Piers.
democracy works in this country. We elect members of parliament. We, the taxpayers, pay their salaries, and the very least we expect is they serve their constituents and they turn up and vote, neither of which he can do for up to 4 weeks in Australia while he's on this ridiculous vanity exercise of assuming the British public will suddenly warm to his creepy little self and vote for him. They're not. They're going to vote for him to do despicable things and then kick him out.
But as Anne said, as Anne admitted, and I admit, we didn't make it for every single vote. A good
Right.
percentage
Yeah, but
is about
4
60%.
weeks.
He's made a
4
judgment.
weeks. 4
He's made, I'll
weeks
tell you
on
the judgment he's
trot.
made to be, like he's made many times actually in the last few years, to be utterly self-serving, to do what he thinks is best for Matt Hancock, not anybody else. And the result is a slap in the teeth to the British taxpayers at a moment when millions of them are facing the worst cost of living crisis of their lifetime.
Piers, hang on.
Last word to you, Anne.
Yes, you've said we didn't all attend every single vote. That is quite true. But we all took judgments on the votes we attended. And let me give you an example. When I was actually moving house, that was the night there was a vote on post offices, I actually got assistance to move the house while I went to the vote on post offices. If there's a big vote while he's in the jungle, what does he do?
Yeah.
Well,
Stays in the jungle.
he's going to miss-
I've got to leave it there. Look, in a way, Lembit, you're the perfect example of why you shouldn't be doing this, because your political career could have been restored. You could have actually rebuilt your career, and you were a very capable politician. But the moment you see munching the old kangaroo nuts, it's
Nadine
over.
Dorris.
It's over.
Nadine Dorris did it, and look,
She's never recovered either.
She did
Oh,
pretty
she,
well.
please.
come on. She got into the cabinet.
she did
Didn't
get in the
even read an
cabinet.
autocue on this
She
show.
went to the cabinet.
All
That's
right,
a
I've
different matter.
got to leave it here.
No, she got in the
Thank
cabinet.
you for
Yeah.
coming in. I
Nice to
appreciate
see
it.
you.
Good to see you both.